in the Perek and Gittin that you're learning now, the Mishnah quotes the Takana Hillel Hiskim Pruzbul, and the simple mashmoy says that Takana usually means the Takana de Rabanan. So it's interesting that Tosfos has an opinion that not only is Moshe Shtaros of the Bezna din deraisa, even Pruzbul is also din deraisa. So what does it mean, Hillel Hiskim Pruzbul? So Tosfos says Hillel was Mefarsem, the din deraisa. A lot of times there are kulas in the din deraisa that there's no mitzvah of farsem. It's better that the Hamoinam should know it. Not mechuyev to tell all the kulas, to be mefarsem all the kulas. But Hillel was mefarsem this kula of Pruzbul because it's a takana that the Ashirim shouldn't violate the din of not lending before Shnas Hashmita. So it's interesting that the Tosfos understands Iskin, Hillel Hiskin Pruzbul. Hiskin means Darash v'Hiskin, means he was mefarsem adin deraisa. You have this in other cases also. This doesn't quote the other cases. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was in business for 40 years. Then he retired at the age of 40. I don't know, I can't retire at the age of 40. I'm over 80. I can't retire. So he retired at the age of 40. Then he sat and he learned till the age of 80. And then at the age of 80, he was the biggest Talmid Chacham. He was learning as an adult for 40 years. And then they appointed him as a chief rabbi for approximately another 40 years. And then he died at the age of 120. So the Gemara says during his presidency, when he was the head of the Sanhedrin, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai with his bezin made 9 takonas. So the Gemara says one of the 9 takonas is a little questionable. Why is it a takona de Rabbanan? Isn't it a din deraisa, a yom henef kula osa? First day Chalamoid is called yom tenufa sa'omer. When the Kohen in Beis HaMikdash does tenufa on the minchas omer. So that's yom henef kula osa. You're not allowed to eat the chodosh all day long. Pasuk says lech v'kol v'kamal l'sochlo aretza mayam hazeh. So aretza means itzuma shal yom. Itzuma shal yom means the daytime part of the day, not the night before. Hayom halach achar halayla v'hiyerev v'hivoker. So on Tezayin Nissen, you're not allowed to eat chodosh leil Tezayin ben Nissen, but yom Tezayin ben Nissen, that's yom Tenuv Zaymer. So he made a takana de Rabbanan, yom hanef kulos. The Gemara says, why is it a takana de Rabbanan? It's a din deraisa because it says ad, and there's a question: how do you interpret ad? Ad v'ad b'chlal, ad v'lo yad b'chlal. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai understood ad v'yad b'chlal. Aretza means that till the end of Itzum Shal Yom, have to wait till the end of the Yom Tezayin. So why does it say once one of the 9 takonas of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai? That's a din deraisa. The Gemara said that's what it means in the Mishnah. Dorash v'hiskin. Hiskin just means he publicized what the din was. So that's what Tosfos says over here also. And there's such a group of Rishonim say the same. That's what it says in the Gemara. That's Dorash v'hiskin. Then the Gemara in Bava Kama has, I think at the end of Perek Merubah, Gemara lists off the 10 takonas of Ezra. So one of the 10 takonas of Ezra, takana means a takana de Rabban. So one of the 10 takonas was that a Balkari is not allowed to learn Torah. So the Gemara says in the second parak, I think, of Brachas, Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira did away with takonas Ezra. He said a Balkari is permitted to learn Torah. And there's a machlokes in Rishonim. Did he take away both parts of the takana? Takana was not allowed, Balkari not allowed to daven, not allowed to learn Torah. So he took away both parts because the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira quoted only says that halakol dvari ka'esh, Am Hashem divrei Torah like esh, ma'esh eni mekabel tuma, av divrei Torah not mekabel tuma. So the only thing Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said was that a Balkari is permitted to learn Torah. He never said beferish whether he's allowed to daven or not. So that's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Ravid. The Ravid is not printed on the side of the Rambam, but the Rosh quotes it. The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam. Whether the Takonas Balkari was abolished only when they get to learning or when they get to davening also. So the Rishonim are all bothered with the kasha. The Gemara has a klal. Ein besni yochel abatel devi besna chabem ken kod le'emene b'chochma v'minyan. So the Rambam writes in the beginning of the second parak in Hilchas Mamrim. I wouldn't remember where it is, but I just gave a shir about it 2 hours ago. I'm not such a big bookie. I looked that up. So for the shir before. So the Rambam quotes the Yerushalmi that din ain't bez nyochal vatla divi bez nachaveira and can gadol men b'choch min, and goes on a takana de Rabanan. If you want to repeal a rabbinic enactment that was made by an earlier bezdin, you only have the ability to do that if you are greater b'chochma v'minyan. So that's what the Rishonim asked. Did Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira think that he was greater than Ezra? He had the ability to be mevatl takanas Ezra. The Gemara says, if not for the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu beat him to it, the Torah would have been given al yedei Ezra, and to show that he was so great in Habot Torah. When on Shemaim they told him to change the Ksav of the Sefer Torah. That's how we assume that the original Sefer Torah in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu were written in Ksav Levi Noah, a different script, a different alphabet. They have it on Hammurabi tablets, a different alphabet. And then Ezra changed it to Ksav Ashuras. Ksav Shalei Mohim Me'ashur. They took it back from Golas Bavel. The different opinions of the Gemara, that's the opinion that we assume. That it was changed by Ezra to demonstrate he was really the Neisan Torah. He was the one who started the whole development of the Torah Shabbat Peh. Very, very little development before him. The main development wasn't the Bai Sheni. It was very little in the Bai Svish. So that's what all the Rishonim asked. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira really think he is greater b'chochma and minyan than Ezra, that he had a right to abolish his takana. So they give different answers to the question. So some of the Rishonim quote, I think the Rashba quotes in the name of the Balei HaTosfos. We don't have it in any of the Tosfos. When they printed the Shas, so they couldn't fit all the Tosfos in on a page. So somebody left out a lot of Tosfos. Sometimes they left out in the middle of a Tosfos. Sometimes they left out a whole Tosfos. So here they left out the whole thing. So the Rashba quotes this in the name of the Balei HaTosfos. Other Rishonim quoted also that this takana was not a takana de Rabanan. Ezra made a real din deraisa. It says every Balkari had to go to mikveh before Maimin Hasina. You see, a Balkari is not allowed to learn Torah. It's a din deraisa. And in a din deraisa, if a later generation, a later Bez wants to disagree, they don't have to be greater b'chochma v'minyan. Ein l'chol ha'shofet shebiyamecha. The pasuk says, "Avosal ha'shofet hashiyah b'yamim ha'im." The Gemara says, of course, by Yamamay, what are you going to do? I want to ask Rab Chaim Ozer Shalos. I'll go to the cemetery in Vilna. He's not going to answer. I'll ask Rab Moshe Weinstein. He's buried here, and he's not going to answer after he's dead. So, of course, you have to go to the Shofet to Shei B'Amheim. So the Gemara says, no. It means we have Svarim from the Shofet. You have Svarim from Rab Moshe Weinstein, from Rab Chaim Ozer. And I disagree. How do I compare to Rab Moshe Weinstein? He knew Shas, he knew everything by heart. He would talk to people, carry on conversations, nudniks, all kinds of people, and he would be muttering mishnais under his breath. The people he talked to didn't realize he's chazering mishnais. He was carrying on a conversation with some old yenta. He didn't want to hurt her feelings. Extremely humble man, and he would be saying mishnais. He was a godel me'ayim. So, but he's not as great as Reb Chaim Ozer. So that's what we say, despite the fact that the later Bezdin is not greater b'chochma minyan. That's only needed if you want to repeal the rabbinic enactment that was made by the earlier Bezdin. That's what the Rambam says. People who don't know think only that's the Rambam Shita. The others don't agree. It's not true. Tosfos in Rosh Hashanah quotes the same thing. Rosh Hashanah Daf Tes, and the Rishonim on the first Mishnah in Shvius quoted that's what the Yerushalmi is, the beginning of Shvius. Nobody disagrees with that. Ein Bezdin Rashay Levatal Divi Bezdin Acharian Ken Gadol Men B'chochma minyan only applies to repeal the rabbinic enactment. But if you're arguing on a din deraisa, the Schachter and the Taz and the Nadi Yehuda and the Chasam Sofer, whatever, Ein l'chol ha'shofet shebiyamecha. If you are a chacham shehigia l'ha'ira, you're entitled to an opinion. If you're not a chacham shehigia l'ha'ira, you're not entitled to an opinion. But if you're entitled to an opinion, you even have the right to disagree with those who preceded you who are greater. You may be making a big mistake. If the other one is greater b'chachma minyan, you may be making a major mistake. So you better be careful when you formulate your shita. If you make a mistake, they'll hold you responsible for your mistake. But strictly speaking, that din doesn't apply. So that's what a group of Rishonim say. The 10 takanas Ezra, 9 were takanas the Rabanan, and the 10th one that a Balkari is not allowed to learn Torah, that was Dorish Vehiskin. Ezra meant it as a real din deraisa. He was a mefarsam a din deraisa. So since it's a din deraisa, so the later Tanoim have a right to disagree with him. They darshan, they interpret the psukim differently. that there is no such din that a Balkari can't daven. So that's the same over here. It's interesting. We usually think that a takana means a takana d'Rabanan. And here in this part of Gittin, you have 2 prokim, I think, all takanas d'Rabanan, and then the Tosefta has more takanas d'Rabanan. If they take an item, they made many different takanas. Then you have the surprising din. I was told that you just finished learning that. Afke'inhu le-Kiddushai'hu. In a few rare instances, the Gemara says the Chachamim were mafkir the Kiddushin, and even though the din usually is, ein dezen, no, what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, Yeshkach b'ach Chachamim l'akadab men ator b'shevei al taseh. When Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, men ator yimuchayiv to blow shofar, but with the Rabanan they were concerned, Shemay Avarena Dalam, and so they did away with it. A Gershon is guy around Erev Pesach in the morning, men ator he should bring the Korban Pesach. With the Rabbanan that made a takana, he's not allowed to bring Pesach Rishon. He should wait till next month and bring the Pesach Sheni. And a whole bunch of other takanas like that. If you have a 4-cornered beged shel pishton, so menatoris chayim and tzitzis, and you put in both the tchelis and the loven. The tchelis has to be a specific color from the chalozin, specific shade of blue, and it has to be the string that you're dyeing, the string or the strings, whatever it is, that you're dyeing blue, has to be made from wool. So if the beged is a beged shel pishton, you're tying on a string that's made from wool in order to dye it with tchelis. So by definition, it's going to be shatnez because you're tying the knot on. So nonetheless, that's what we learn at the dinner. So midrabanan, the Gemara said there was a machlokes bisham. There were many machlokes bisham and bisil. Ruba, most of the cases where there's machlokes bisham and bisil, we pass on like bisil. The Gemara says 2 different reasons. One reason because they were the rabbim, achram lahatas. The other reason because they were more humble than bisham. It doesn't mean bisham were arrogant. They were also humble, but the bisil were more humble than the beishamai. And it's interesting, so they're more humble. So when they graduate, you give them the humility award. Why is the reward that you pass on like them? So the Gemara means to say that a person who's more humble stands a better chance of being mechaben lamitu shel Torah. That's interesting. I remember when I was a student in yeshiva, the mashgiach was from Slobodka, Rabbi Lesson. So he would always talk about that when Brachim are learning the Gemara, and one of them has a pshat and the other one disagrees, so each one has an igiyah to prove that he's right. They're not really interested in what's the truth. That's scandalous. They should be interested what the correct pshat is, but a lot of times they're not. So they don't want to give in that they made a mistake. Even though the svar of the other one of the Charutzis sounds better than what they said, they'll keep on defending what they said. So that's what the Gemara says, a person who's humble, who won't insist that everything, his muskal rishon is always correct. The humble people stand a better chance of being mechaben lamitu shel Torah. So when we say in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, aseh l'charav, everybody has to pick a Rebbe in order to pass on all the shilas. So you have to pick a Rebbe who's a Talmid Chacham, and he has to be a humble person, stands a better chance of being mechaben lamitu shel Torah. And then the Gemara says, in the beginning of Soita, the Gemara says, Ben Azai never got married. So how did he know about the shir yichud, about the shir stira, kini a stira by Soita? He was never married. How does he know how long it takes? More quotes the pasuk, Sor Hashem li'Reiv. That pasuk is the basis why any psakim, any chacham is binding. He's only a human being. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he misunderstood the din. So we assume Sor Hashem li'Reiv, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will probably reveal the secrets of the truth of the Torah, what the real din is to those who have Yirah Shamayim. So the Gemara quotes that pasuk. It means that one who's a Yirah Shamayim stands a better chance of being mechaben lamitu shel Torah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu will reveal the secrets of the Torah to those who have Yirah Shamayim. So these are some of the things to look for. By the Avodah from years ago, they used to believe in oracles. They ask the oracle what to do, and the oracle will tell them. We don't believe in oracles. The Rebbe Shalom is not going to make a miracle. I'm going to go to a rabbi who doesn't know how to learn, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make a miracle. The rabbi doesn't know anything. He doesn't know which way to hold Yeridea. He's going to pass on the Shaila. So we have to asay l'chara. We have to pick a rabbi who seems to be learned, who seems to be a yirei shamayim, who seems to be humble, and then he has to have a few more milos. Also, the Gemara tells you in different places who stands a better chance of being mechaven l'mitzvah shel Torah. So again, the Gemara has this surprising din. Afke'inhu Rabanan le-Kiddushai'hu. In rare cases, the Chachamim usually say, they can tell you, we paskin, this is a rare case, we paskin like Beishamai there. That's one of the 6 cases. Tosis in the beginning of Sukkah, I think the Afke'inhu and Aleph. Tosis quotes from the Siddur Rav Amram going that there are 6 cases where we paskin like Beishamai. There were 18 cases at the end of the first parak in Masech Shabbos. The Yudches Gzeirus. One day, it's like Congress in the United States. They look around the room, who's there today, who's not there, and then, all the people who are going to disagree with my suggestion are not here. So I bring up a suggestion, and we pass it into law. So that's what the Beishamai did one fine day. Beisil must have been by a Shever Bracha, so by a Bar Mitzvah or something. So most of the Beisil were not there. So the few who were there disagreed with the Beishamai on 18 different issues, and Beishamai pushed through 18 Gzeirus in one day. But the Gemara said the next day, the rest of the Beisil came back, and they discussed the matter, and they gave in to the Beishamai. So we don't count those 18 Gzeirus that we paskin like Beishamai against Beisil. Beisil will agree to the end to Beishamai. But there were 6 additional cases, that Tosfos quotes from the Siddur Rav Amram going, but we paskin like Beishamai. So that's one of the 6. That if you have a beged shal pishton, you're not permitted to put, they don't allow you to put in tzitzis, because you may fall in the days of the Tanaim. And today also there are people who are selling imitation tchelis. It's not authentic tchelis. And if it's imitation tchelis, you're not yotze the mitzvah of tchelis. So there's no esay dechalo esay. Esay dechalo esay is only if it's iyab shalakayim shneim. Here he's not being yotze the mitzvah of lavan. He's not being yotze the mitzvah of tchelis. So the mitzvah of lavan, he didn't have to have strings that were made from wool. He could have made the strings that are made for pishtan, so it wouldn't be any shatnez. So that's one of the 6 cases where we paskin like Beishamai. So the Gemara has a whole bunch of cases. Yeshkech v'achachamim l'akadav men haTorah v'shevi altas. How did the Chachamim know that? They knew there's a pasuk. It's the last pasuk in Parshas Achreinos. It says, "V'shmatem es mishmarti l'lilt yasas michukos atavayis ha'ela shenasu lefnecha." A long pasuk. So the pasuk v'shmatem es mishmarti has a connotation asum mishmeres le'mishmarti. That's the opening Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. So one of them was, Asay Siog La Torah. The Chachamim are encouraged by the Torah to make harchakas and siogim. We can't allow people to go all the way to the edge of the cliff. They can fall over the cliff. They said, don't go. You don't have to stay a mile away from the cliff. You have to stay a few inches away. So you don't get nervous. You shouldn't fall over the cliff. So the Chachamim were encouraged to make Zeres Rabban. So that we understand. You shouldn't write on Shabbos with your left hand, because even though in Torah it's mutter, you shouldn't carry in a carmelis, shouldn't eat chicken that's cooked with milk. We understand. But how did the Chachamim know that had a right to make a gzeira de Rabanan, ba'akiras, to violate a mitzvah in Torah? I'm allowed to wear a beged shal pishton, and I don't have to put on tzitzis. I'm a batla mitzvah. They should have said, don't wear a 4-corner beged shal pishton. They didn't say that. You're allowed to wear the 4-corner beged, and you don't have to put on tzitzis. You're mavatla mitzvah. Don't blow shofar, so you didn't become the mitzvah. How did they know they had a right to do that? That's a strong question. So Bechon Asma has an interesting suggestion that Rashi al Torah is always quoting Gemaras and Mishnayos and Midrashim and so on. When Rashi writes about diktuk, that's on his own. That's not from the Gemara, that's not from the Midrash. But whenever he has something of substance, diktuk is okay, also important. But when he tells you an idea, the ideas are from the Chazal. So he says in the pasuk, "L'sasim and adavish agid locha yam and small, afil al small shu yimin val yimin shu hu small." That the halacha is binding even if the rabbi made a mistake. So the Ramban is the first one to ask the kasha, and Ramban in Sefer HaMitzvos asks, if you know the first Mishnah in Hurrius, it says beferish, the Bez Nagadol unanimously, all 71 Rabbanim say lahakel on something, and I know that they're making a mistake. I marked their bechinas when they were learning for smicha. And I know they all passed with a 65, and that question they all got wrong. I know they're making a mistake. So it says, I'm not allowed to follow the psak of the Bezna Gadol. How does Rashi quote that? Sifrei, Hayimin Shu Smal Al Smol She'imin. So the Ramban is the first one who asked that question. If you look in the end of the Malamed L'Hoyel, he writes, he has a few essays, after all the children, Rab David Tzvi Hoffman. He's more known for his work in biblical criticism, but he wrote very nice tshuvas. Brief, bekitzer, just gets to the point. He doesn't give long pilpulim. And if it's already worked out somewhere, so look in this in the Sefer, he has the right answer. Sure. Look in the Mishnah Berurah over there, look in the Orchos Chaim over there. He has nothing to add, so he just tells you what it says in the Svar. So in the Sefer, the Malamed L'Hoyel, he quotes different suggestions on this kasha. So on this question, how can Rashi and Chumash quote Ayimin Shu Smal Al Smol She'imin is against the first Mishnah in Harius? So Rabbi Chana Basman has an essay. I think he wrote that whole Kuntra's Divrei Seifim. I think he wrote most of it when he was visiting in America. Came to America to raise money, and he stayed for a while. It wasn't too successful in raising so much money. Americans, Jews were not so free giving away their money at that time. But so in a sefer he has a suggestion. Ayimin Shu Smal Al Smol She'imin is the mocker that tells us not if the rabbis made a mistake. No, they tell you in the Chumash it says today you have to blow shofar even though it's Shabbos. But with the power vested in us as the rabbis, we tell you don't follow the Chumash. Not that they're making a mistake. They make a mistake, you're not mechuyev to listen. Rashi doesn't mean a mistake. It means if they tell you, even on the Chumash it says one way, we were given authority to make a gzeira de Rabanan, not only l'chumri, you're not allowed to carry a carmelis, and you're not allowed to write with the left hand, you're not allowed to eat chicken and milk. They tell you not to fulfill a mitzvah in a Torah. So yesh kach be'achachamim, if they have a reason why they're concerned about some kind of a chashash, they have a right to make a gzeira de Rabanan, even though it's bakiras davim in a Torah, provided that it's b'shei b'altas. If it's bekum v'yasei, then it's a machlokes in the Gemara. And lemaskana, it's a machlokes the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. The Bavli in Yevamis, it goes on and on and on. Daf Peches, Daf Peites, Daf Tzadik. It's a three-blot Gemara. A long discussion. The Bavli finally comes to the conclusion, En kerach b'yachachamim, l'akadom elator bekum v'yasei. They do not have the right. And the Yerushalmi comes to the conclusion, like the other opinion in the Bavli. Well, we follow the Bavli, that yesh kach halakha only b'shei v'altase, not bekum v'yasei. So that's what the Gemara has this question. A woman is an eshes ish deraisa, and there's an isa koris, an isa misa for an eshes ish to live with someone other than a husband. And then the Chachamim allow her to remarry because the husband gave her a pasal get. That's no good ben Torah. And with the Rabanan, we allow her to remarry. So that's the Gemara's kash. Ein kerach b'yachachamim l'akadom elator bekum v'yasei. How do they have the authority to allow people to do an aveira? If you would hold like the Yerushalmi, there wouldn't be any problem. But the Bavli l'shitosa, the Bavli holds it as a problem. That's what the Gemara says. How can you say Afke'inhu they allow an eshes ish to remarry? The Orthodox don't give so much authority to their rabbis. The Reform have the ability to allow their balabatim to drive to the synagogue on the Sabbath and to intermarry and to do everything called avaros. But we don't. The Orthodox don't give so much authority, so they don't have authority. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, what's the answer? So the Gemara said, Tenech the Kodesh Bekaspa, Kodesh Bebiyam, Ma'ikalamema. Why is Kodesh Bekaspa? Why there you can't understand it? Why is Kodesh Bekaspa Bud? So the Pashup shot perhaps in the Gemara is Rashi and Taisus say, Kodesh Bekaspa, so you say, Hefke Bezna Hefke. So then we understand. The Mafka, he was Mekadosh the girl with a ring. That's the common practice today. It's in Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah quotes that from the Zohar, from the Tikkun Zohar. That the minig is a Mekadosh with a ring, something api Kabbalah. I don't know. You have to have the intelligence of a 40-year-old to study Kabbalah. I'm not there yet. I'm over 80, but I don't have the intelligence of a 40-year-old. So I don't study Kabbalah. So in Shulchan Aruch they quote that you get married with a ring. So the fellow was married a long time ago with a ring. The wife they already stole her ring. She already had the husband had to buy a different ring. She lives in Manhattan. So they stole everything already. So she doesn't have the ring anymore. But they're married already. So you say Hefker Bezna Hefker, so it could be Mafkir the marriage. What kind of Hefker Bezna Hefker? Today, the husband gave a get, they shlich, then he was mevatel the shlich shlai b'fanav. So when Torah the get is no good. Some of the Rabanan, we say she can remarry because hefker bezna, hefker what? Today bezna is mafker ex post facto. They're married 50 years already. She already lost the first ring. She doesn't have it. You can't be mafker adova shel ba'olam, can't be mafker adova she'ena ba'olam. He was mekadosh with a box of chocolates. She ate up all the chocolate. They don't exist anymore. So what does it help? And even if the chocolates are, even if the ring is still here, you mafker the ring mekanal haba. How does it help la mafreya? How does it undo the marriage of mafreya? So some say, based on the Tosfos, it's in a few Masechtas, beginning above Metzia and Avodah Zarah, different Masechtas. The Gemara says, "Ein kerach mi'achachamim lakadov ben ator bekum v'yasei." So Tosfos said, but if it's a dova hadoime, then you do have the ability to. If they can dress up the din that it should sound like a din deraisa, if they can fool the public into believing that it's a real din, so that's what the Chazanei said. What do you mean? That's conservative Judaism. That's what the conservatives did. They took a din from the Gemara and they said a whole bunch of words, and then they waved the magic wand, and it came out that everything is mutter. Everything is mutter. What kind of business is that? Like some said, we allow the Balabatim to drive to the synagogue on Shabbos because pikuach nefesh. Why? It's a spiritual sakana. It's a sakana to their nefesh. There's no such thing. If they're going to convert Shulchan Aruch to have a din, the Nochrim kidnapped my daughter, my young daughter, and they're going to convert her. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, if they tell me on Shabbos, I have the ability to drive to the place where the Nochrim are and to bribe everybody, to drive the police and to bribe all the people. I have a chiyuv to be Mechal Shabbos. It's not because Pikuach Nefesh. That's not Pikuach Nefesh. Her life is not in danger. That's a different din. Chatei b'shul shetiske. It's a different halach. Sometimes you're allowed to violate based on a different pasuk. Sometimes we would recommend you're allowed to violate an avera kala if it's going to lead to great revach. Let's say you can buy a sweepstakes ticket. You may win $1 million. So I want to invest $100. I would invest $100 if he can make $1 million. I wouldn't invest $500,000 on the chance, one chance in 5,000 that I'll win $1 million. I wouldn't do that. I'll invest a penny. I'll invest $100, but more than $100 I wouldn't invest. So here the Gemara says you have to know chatei b'shul shetiske. We allow you to do a slight avera in order to gain much more. Here the slight avera is to be Mechal Shabbos, to drive my car and go take money and bribe the chief of police and get my daughter back. So it's chatei, that's an avera kala, chilul Shabbos. In order to get them, my daughter won't be a meshumit, and I'll watch my daughter. I'll raise her properly. So you have rare cases where you say chatei b'shul shetiske, chatei b'shul shetiske. By the Hasidim, they do that all the time. The Hasidim, the real Hasidim, not what we see today. The real Hasidim, they would go to mikvah on Shabbos morning, then they would be Mavesedra, then they would learn with their children, and by the time they moseyed around to get to Damashach, it's already 10:30. They already missed his man Kriya Shema. Sometimes they missed his man Tefillah also, because they're making so many hachonas. So they say that's based on Chatei B'Shul Shetiske. You're allowed to miss man Kriya Shema, it's man Tefillah and so on, if you're going to gain a lot in Ruchnias by that. So that's Rab Chaim Volozhin, and makes fun of that, the Nefesh HaChaim. So he says, Chatei B'Shul Shetiske was only Kodem Matan Torah. Yaakov Avinu married two sisters, that was Chatei B'Shul Shetiske. He saw Baruch HaKodesh is going to be Mamad Yud Beishvatim from these girls. So that was Kodem Matan Torah. There wasn't, the din of Shtei Achoyos wasn't given yet, that you're not allowed to marry two sisters. Alach Matan Torah, there's no din of Chatei B'Shul Shetiske. So the Talmidim, Rab Chaim Volozhin, say that's against the Gemara. What he wrote, what the Rebbe wrote, the Nefesh HaChaim, that was an exaggeration. He was writing a whole attack against the Hasidim. He doesn't say who he's talking about, but it's obvious he's talking about the Hasidim. So he says, if you're going to daven Kriya Shema 5 minutes after the Zman, that's comparable to sitting in Sukkah on Purim and reading the Megillah on Chanukah and lighting there as Chanukah on Sukkot. If you missed it by 5 minutes, if you missed the train by 1 minute, you missed the train, you missed it. Says you have to do the mitzvahs in the proper time. Chatei B'Shul Shetiske applies Lachem Matan Torah also, they say, but in rare cases. It's very restricted. So again, this is a problematic Gemara. Gemara says, "Tenech the Kodesh Bekas," but we understand why we say Afke'inhu Abon. Why? Because Hefke Bezin Hefke. The Bezin could be Mafke LeMafreya. They were married already 50 years, and now the husband does the shtick. He's Mevatel Shliach Shaloi B'Fanov. So now the Mafke LeMafreya. The ring never belonged to the Chassan 50 years ago. How does that work? So some suggest that based on that Taisus, and if you're Masechta, Taisus says, Yesh Keach B'Achachamim L'Kadar Ma'atar B'Kum B'Yasei also, if it's a Dor B'Hadaima, if it sounds like a Din Derais, you can fool the public into believing that it's a Din Derais. So the Chazon Ish is very upset about that. He said, that's conservative Judaism. How can it be? So he gives a different interpretation of Taisus. Rabbi Soloveitchik also didn't like that Taisus. But the Taisus in a few Masechtas, very hard. The Chazon Ish reinterprets all the Taisus. Very hard to reinterpret. Pashta says that Taisus really means it. Why? The pasuk tells you that the way Rabbi Yochanan Basman said, pasuk tells you, "Oh, yimin shu small shu yimin." That yesh kach be'al chachamim, if they feel it necessary, yesh kach lakor dovim and atayra. So why did the Gemara make a distinction between kum li'aseh shei ve'al ta'aseh? Because there's another pasuk that says, the Gemara, the first half of Megillah, quotes a pasuk. The Maharsha is not sure what the pasuk is. It the last pasuk in Chumash Vayikra, the last pasuk in Chumash Bamidbar, which are practically identical with a slight shinoi. Ela chukim hamishpatim asher tziva Hashem es Moshe b'Har Sinai al bnei Yisrael. Something like that. There's a slight shinoi, so that Tziv explains why there's a shinoi. What changed between the end of Vayikra and the end of Bamidbar? It explains why it's a slight shinoi. So the Gemara always has the assumption, Eila is a miyut, only these and only these. Eila mitzvahs v'achuk hamishpatim. So the Gemara says, Mikan, from this pasuk we learn, En nover Hershel chadish davar miyato. You're not allowed to listen to a Nabi if he's going to change any din in the Torah. A Nabi, you can accept what the Nabi says if he tells you Hayru Ashua. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me on Nevuah you should smoke a cigar this Shabbos. But he said, Baruch Shalom told me from now on you can all smoke cigars on Shabbos. Then is your Nabi HaSheker? No Nabi can come up and change a din. That's called that's called the Chiddush Doma. Chiddush is if you're going to change it. You listen to the Navi, but if he says to be Oika Dom and Atar B'Kum Yaseh, so that could be that's the pshat. That whenever a Navi tells you to do something, Elav Tishmon. Whenever the Bezin tells you something, you have to listen, even if it's Akira's Dov Men HaTorah. But if it's gonna be a Dova Chodosh, the Navi is going to be Mechadish something. You don't have to you throw out one of the 613 mitzvah or one aspect. The 39 malachas is going to throw out some of the malachas. Going to change some of the dinim permanently. So that's a limitation in the Koach HaNavi, and the same limitation in the Koach HaBezin. Bezin has a right to be ekadav ben HaTorah, even sometimes become yaseh. But if it's going to be a davar chadosh, davar hasei saklal. Davar chadosh means davar hasei saklal. Then just like it's a restriction in the Navi, so too it's a restriction in the Koach of the Chachamim. So maybe that's why Koach Lakar Bikum V'Yaseh, because that's called L'Chadish Davar. You can't be Mechadish, you can't undo a din. But if it's a Davar Hadaima, it looks like it's a real din there, right? Then that's the simple Pshat and Taisa. That Taisa holds the Davar Hadaima, it's been mismah. So that's why some interpret over here. Teilach L'Kodesh B'Kaspo, because by Kedusha Kesef you can understand Hefke Bezna Hefke. What kind of Hefke Bezna Hefke? They're married 50 years already. She ate up the whole box. He gave her a box of chocolates for the Kiddushin. She ate up all the chocolates 50 years ago. How can they be mafkir? How can they mafkir a dover shalom nimtza ba'olam achshav? Just like you can't be mafkir a dover shalom ba'olam, you can't be mafkir a dover she'enena ba'olam anymore. You can't be mafkir l'mafreya. So some interpret that that's what it means, that it's a davar hadaima, like that Taisa said. Davar hadaima, so since it looks like, strictly speaking, it's not correct, but since it looks a little bit like hefka bezna hefka, so then we allow it because they have an important situation. So that's Rashi and Taisa along that. Tenech the Kodesh B'Kaspa. Rashi quotes from Rabbi of a different shad. Tenech the Kodesh B'Kaspa because Kedusha Kesef is only the Rabanan. So Rashi has a lot of kasha. It's not the Rabanan. How can it be the Rabanan? So there's a famous Rambam in the very beginning of Hilchos Ishus. The Rambam is always quoting Gemaras and Yerushalmis and Toseftas and Shuvas HaGoinim. Everything is quoting. Whenever he says original, he says Yerushalmi. So now they have computers, so they checked out, I think it's 99 times it says Yerushalmi. And one of the times that the Rambam says Yerushalmi, the Rebbe is Masik, he says it's not Yerushalmi, it's a Beferish Mishnah, somewhere in Zroim, something. Okay, so there are not too many Yerushalmis in the Rambam. A big sefer, 14, Yud Davar Chalom. The Aruch HaZok has 14 volumes, but he doesn't have so many Yerushalmi. So here, he doesn't say Yerushalmi. The Rambam says that Kiddushay Kesef, Kiddushay Shtarabiyah are deraisa, and Kiddushay Kesef is Medivrei Sofim. What does it mean Medivrei Sofim? So many misunderstood it to mean that it's only Rabanan. So the Kes Mishnah says he doesn't think that's what it means. The expression Divrei Sofim appears in Mishnayos, and the Rambam got the Lushanus also. Divrei Sofim means a law that the Chachamim transmitted or developed. So a Takana Derabanan is Divrei Sofim, and something from the Torah Shabbat Peh that was developed by the Chachamim is also called Divrei Sofim. The Rambam in the Hakdama to the Pirush HaMishnayos has a big dispute with the Geonim. The Midrashim say, Kol Masha Talmud Vasik Asa L'Chadish Ne'emar Lo L'Moshe M'Sinai. Any good Chiddush that Talmud Chacham comes up with must be told to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Geonim were on the impression, the Rambam thinks that it's a misunderstanding, the Geonim were of the impression every single din was told to Moshe Rabbeinu HaSinai, and whenever there's a machlokes in the Gemara, it's based on forgetfulness. They forgot what the din was. So the Rambam says that's scandalous. The most precious thing we have is the Torah, and they forgot everything. And every page in Shas there's a machlokes. Abai v'Rav, machlokes of Yehuda Reb Shimon. Everything is a machlokes. I think the Avedram points out there's only one parak in Mishnayos that doesn't have a machlokes recorded. That's Azel Mekayman. He said that's why they picked Azel Mekayman for the Siddur, that doesn't mention any machlokes. There is machlokes about one of the dinim. The Gemara there quotes it in Azel Mekayman, but it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. There's one Tana holds up, so when you bring a korban tamid, you do 3 zrikas on the Mizbeach. We don't have such a thing. 3 zrikas? On 3, some you do 1 zrika, sometimes you do 2 zrikas. Shtaim shein, sometimes you do 4. Whoever heard you do 3. So there's one Tana holds that you do 3, but it's not quoted in the Mishnah. The Gemara quotes it. But that's what the Rabanan is against the Geonim. How can it be every single din on Torah Shabbat Peh was told to Moshe Rabbeinu, and every machlokes is based on forgetfulness, so they forgot everything? Forgot the whole Torah Shabbat Peh. Every page in Shas is full of machlokes. So the Rambam says he doesn't believe that that's correct. Kol mashatama basit asal l'chadash ne'emar Moshe Messina means a different thing. The text of the Chumash was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Midrash Schachter and the Dreshes Peh, and then the Chachamim in every generation had the right to say on their own. The Gemara says, "Einon dom gzar shavim can kibla mei rabbi." You need a tradition. But all the others, not only Adam Don Kal V'Chaim Miatzma, all the other Yud Gimel Midrash Schachter and Dreshes Peh, you can darshan on your own. You don't need a tradition. So what does it mean? Kol mashatam and vasat lachas chadish? No, it means the text of the Chumash was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the principles are abstract. The Midrash Schachter and the Dreshes Peh, but the actual darshaning of the dinim was made by the Chachamim over all the generations. That's why the Rambam writes, the Taryag mitzvahs, Rambam has 14 guiding principles in the first half of the Sefer mitzvahs to determine what belongs in the list of Taryag mitzvahs. So he has one klal, you don't include dinim derabanan. Then even dinim deraisa, you only include as pshut shal mikra. Whatever's a drasha the Torah Shabbat Peh, you don't include. So the Ramban is very upset. Said, what's wrong? The drashas of the Torah Shabbat Peh are only midrabanan. No, they're not midrabanan. But the Rambam thinks they weren't given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is given pshut shal mikra, and anything above that is Torah Shabbat Peh over the generations. Every generation they were darshan more and more. So you're going to say the Taryag mitzvahs includes even dinim of Torah Shabbat Peh. So let's say yesterday we had 613 mitzvahs. Today a Talmid Chacham comes up with a new pshat, with a new mitzvah. He has to throw out one of the old mitzvahs. And then if you come up with 100 new mitzvahs in 100 years, you have to throw out 100 of the old mitzvahs. You can only have 613. So the Rambam says, L'shitasa, no. Every generation they come up with new dinim, Torah Shabbat Peh, it's a din deraisa. But it's not included in Taryag. Taryag means lefi pshuta shal mikra. Before you darshan any psukim, you have 613 mitzvahs. The drushes of the Torah Shabbat Peh are all there, I said, but it's not included in the Taryag. So that's what the Kesef Mishnah said. That's what the Rambam meant when he says that Kiddushay Kesef is Divrei Sofim. It didn't mean that it's the Rabbanan. It meant that it was developed through the Torah Shabbat Peh. Kicha Misdei Afron. It's not Pshutu Shal Mikra. It's a drasha of the Torah Shabbat Peh. It's interesting. There were still karoim. Here in Herzl you have shuls. They still have, but you're going to see us with the karoim down. So the different groups of karoim have different shtick. So you have karoim from Europe, from Asia, from Africa. Each group has different shtick. One of the things that they all have in common is none of them have Kiddushay Kesef. So the Rambam was fighting with karoim. He lived in Egypt. He had a lot of fights with the karoim. So that's what he says. Kiddushay Kesef is Medivrei Sofim. And then he says, Kvanogel Kol Yisrael L'Kaddish B'Kesef. The minig by the Rabbinic Jew. What do you mean Kvanogel Kol Yisrael? The Jews have a minig. Why? The non-Jews reading the Rambam's book? The whole book was intended for Jews, wasn't it? It means the Rabbinic Jews are Mekadosh B'Kesef to demonstrate that we do subscribe to the Torah Shabbat Peh. Unlike the Karoim who don't believe in the Torah Shabbat Peh, and none of them use Kiddushay Kesef, we do believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. We dafke use Kiddushay Kesef. It has the same in other places also. The Rambam says, when you do a bris milah, so he quotes the Gemara in Chulin, you can cut off the orla with a knife, with a metal blade, or with a piece of glass, broken glass that's sharp on the edge, or a blade of grass. Sometimes you can cut your finger. If you have an envelope, sometimes you can cut your finger when you touch the flap. You have to be careful. So the Rambam says, he's quoting a Gemara in Chulin, whatever cuts you can use for bris milah. He says you can use a scissors or you can use a knife or anything that cuts. He says, Kvano Kol Yisrael, the minig by the Jews is, as opposed to who else is doing a bris milah? The Ishmaelim. Well, then the minig by the Jews is to use a knife. Why do you use a knife? Why don't you use scissors? You're cutting around. They pull the orla, then they use one. Would it make more sense to use a scissors cutting around? I remember once a moil from Chicago came to the kollel in New York, and he wanted to show us the practice of other moilim he thought was improper. He showed us a video of the way the other moilim do the bris, and he made a comment in the middle. So a little bit from the orla was hanging down. He says he doesn't understand why they cut it with a knife. Why don't they cut it with a scissors, something hanging down? So the answer is because the Karoim insisted that you can only do a bris milah with scissors. The Karoim didn't have the Torah Shabbat Peh, so they invented their own Torah Shabbat Peh. So the pasuk says in Sefer Yoshua, when they came to Gilgal, I think, the first day when they crossed over the Yarden, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yoshua ben Nun, Shuv kach locha charvos tzurim, shuv moles b'nei Yisrael shenis. All the Jewish people had a bris milah in Eretz Mitzrayim, but the Gemara says from the days of Avraham Avinu till the days of Yoshua ben Nun, you fulfill the mitzvah milah by only cutting off the or ha'orla. The Eva ha'orla has a thick skin on the outside, then it has a very thin membrane below it. So in the days of Avraham Avinu till the days of Yoshua ben Nun, he didn't have to cut off the lower membrane. Only needed milah. Then Yoshua ben Nun was told they have to do priya. Priya means either you rip or you cut off the bottom membrane also. So that's how the Gemara interprets the pasuk in Sefer Yoshua. Kach l'cha charvos tzurim. Take a lot of knives. Shumal is menel sal shenis. Give the people another bris. The people already had a bris in Mitzrayim 40 years ago. You have to do another bris. What is it to do another bris? The Gemara says to do the priya. Until now, all you needed was to cut off the or orla, the outer skin that's thick. And from now on, you have to cut the ora priya as well. So the Karaites interpreted kach l'cha charvos tzurim, two knives that cut one against the other. We would call it a scissors balaz. So they insisted you only yotze bris milah if you use a scissors. So that's why the Rambam says you can use a scissor, you can use a knife. And the minig by the Jews, as opposed to the Karaitic Jews, minig by the Jews, the Rabbinic Jews is that you don't use the scissors. They'll think that you're a Karai. You use the Afka knife, even though it's a little funny. So that's the same over here. The Rambam says that Kiddushay Kesef is Torah Shabbat Peh, And that's why Kvanog call Yisrael Kaddish B'Kesef. The rabbinic Jews choose to do Kedusha Kesef to make a declaration, to demonstrate in public that we do accept the Torah Shebaal Peh. Used to be one of the Rabbanim, used to go Simcha Asaf. He was on the Rabbanut. He learned in Tels in Europe before the war. And then he was on the Rabbanut in the early years, and at the time Hakamas HaMedina. So he put out he did a lot of research on the Karayitic shtick. So he has this in one of his Svarim. By the Bris Milah and by the Kiddushay Kesef, that the Rama means that we want to demonstrate that we're following the Torah Shebaal Peh. So the Kesef Mishnah interprets that that's what the Rama meant. It doesn't mean that Kiddushay Kesef is mid the Rabbanan, the way Rashi understood Rabbi Yosef. No, it means Kiddush Tenach the Kodesh B'Kaspa. Kiddushay Kesef is Torah Shebaal Peh. So in Torah Shebaal Peh we say Yesh Kerach B'Yad Chacham L'Akadov Min Torah B'Kum B'Yaseh. And Torah Shebichsav Ein Kerach B'Yad Chacham L'Akadov Min HaTorah. What do the two words Min HaTorah mean? So Kes Mishnah says the Rambam understood in the Gemara. The Rambam doesn't say it royally. He's saying on his own over here. He's not saying it royally originally. He's quoting a Gemara. He's quoting this Gemara. That Kiddushay Shtar in Bia is Torah Shebichsav. And that's the Gemara's kasha. Tenach the Kodesh B'Kaspa Kiddushay Kesef is only Torah Shebaal Peh. So in Torah Shebaal Peh we say Yesh Kerach B'Achachamim Lakar Afilu B'Kum B'Yaseh. The Maskonas Ababli was En Kerach Lakar B'Kum B'Yaseh. That's in Torah Shebichsav not. But in Torah Shebaal Peh, Yesh Kerach Lakar Afilu B'Kum B'Yaseh. Torah Shebaal Peh is a lower level of severity, slightly less than Torah Shebichsav. There's a Magen Avram in Hilchos Shabbos who quotes a Mordechai in Megillah, I think it's a Mordechai Megillah, who quotes a kasha from one of the Balei HaTosfos from Vienna. I forgot his name already. So he asked a kasha. The Gemara says, Rav Tzolish, the Gemara says in Brachas, Rav Tzolish al Shabbos, Be'er Shabbos, Rav would daven Ma'ariv of Leil Shabbos after Plaga Mincha on Friday. He would make Kabbalah Shabbos early, the way we learned, Poshup Shabbos, Kabbalah Shabbos early. And then the Gemara has a shaila, would he say Kiddush then also? The Gemara says yes. He would say Kiddush and at least start the meal. Maybe he may finish the meal, that's a different question. But he would say Kiddush and at least start the meal then. So this Balei HaTosfos was bothered with Akasha that Tosefes Shabbos, there are different opinions in the Gemara. What is the makar of Tosefes Shabbos? So one opinion is that there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai of Esanetias. Esanetias is a din of Tosefes Shvius. There's a din l'hosa michol ala kodesh whenever there's a kedusha zman, Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur. The Rambam passes only Yom Kippur, but that's a shiti chido. We in Shulchan Aruch they don't accept the Rambam. They say you have to be mosa michol ala kodesh every Shabbos and Yom Tov, not just Yom Kippur. And according to one opinion in the Gemara, the whole sugi is in Rosh Hashanah Daf Tes. According to one opinion, it's a mamatzin. It's an extension from the halacha Moshe Sinai of Esanetias. There's a din of Tosefes Shvius. You should be mosa michol ala kodesh. But if you have 10 young saplings, that if you're not going to do avodas hakarka with them during this man of Tosefes, so then it's going to be nifsad. You're going to have a big hefsed. So there's a halacha Moshe Sinai that we're mekel on Tosefes Shvius. The halacha Moshe tells us the chumra and the kula, that in principle there is a din of Tosefes, should be mosa michol ala kodesh, but there's an exception to the rule. When there's going to be a hefsed merubah, then it's mutter to violate Tosefes Shvius. So you take that din of Tosefes Shvius and you extend it to every Shabbos and every Yom Tov. So this Balei HaTosfos from Vienna, I forgot his first name, so he's bothered with Akasha, but Kiddush is a din that's in Torah Shebichsav. It says, Zochar is Yom Shabbos L'Katcha, and Atzeres HaDibros, and Parshas Yisrael. And Zochar, the verb Zayin Chof Reish, sometimes it means remember, sometimes it means lahaskir, to mention. So the Torah Shebaal Peh interprets, our tradition has it, Zochar means lahaskir, to recite Kiddush. So this Balei HaTosfos asked an interesting kasha. How can you be yotze the din deraisa of Kiddush if you're going to recite Kiddush during this man of Tosefes? Rab Tzolish al Shabbos, Be'er Shabbos, going to daven Ma'ariv early after Plaga Mincha, so the sun didn't set yet, and then he's going to say Kiddush when the sun is still shining during the Zman of Tosef. So ask the Kasha, but Tosef Shabbos is only known through Torah Shabbal Peh, because he's taking the din of Esa Netiyas, which is Halach al Moshe Missinai, and you're extending it to all Zmanim Mikudoshim. Not only is there a requirement of the Haisim Echal al HaKadosh by Shnas HaShmita, there's a requirement every Shabbos and Yom Tov. And you say it's good enough to recite Kiddush. Kiddush is in Aseres Adibras. Zachar, how can you be Yotzei Adin Deraisa during this man? That's only Torah Shabbal Peh. Torah Shabbal Peh is a lower level. So just like Meshenim B'chui B'dover and Emoti Acher Medechai Vosam, how can you fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush during this man of Tosefes? That's a lower level. Torah Shabbal Peh, Allah HaMashem is a lower level than something that's Torah Shabbat. There is a Gemara in the beginning of Kiddushin, where the Gemara says, it has a few times in the Gemara, Milsa Dalsia B'Kal V'chaimer, Torach V'Kosav L'Akra. Sometimes you have a pasuk, you really didn't need the pasuk, you would have been able to figure it out based on a Kal V'chaimer from another time. But once in a while you have that, so why take it? Lama L'Kra, I would have known it on my own. I would have made a Kal V'chaimer, so why do you need a pasuk for? The answer is no. If you have a pasuk, it makes it into Torah Shabbat. It's only a Kal V'chaimer, then it's Torah Shabbal Peh. Torah Shabbal Peh is slightly more kal than Torah Shabbat. And Pri Megadim in the Psicha Kolelis, the Orach Chaim, Pri Megadim was, what did he do for a living? He used to teach young children Chumash. He was a Malamed Dardiki. But he was a great Goyen. He has his works on Yeridei and Orach Chaim, everybody uses it. So Pri Megadim has a Psicha Kolelis. It's not a general introduction to Orach Chaim. It's a general introduction to all of Torah Shabbal Peh. It's kedai to go through it. My father used to tell me a lot. Someone would deserve a doctoral thesis to get a doctorate if he writes a thesis on the Psicha Kolelis of the Pri Megadim, because it's so rich, he has so much to say there. So many years later, I found out there are already 25 svarim written commentaries on the Psicha in Europe. They wrote many svarim. They already got their doctorates writing this svarim on the Psicha Kolelis. So the Pri Megadim in the beginning of his Psicha, his general introduction to Torah Shabbal Peh, so he he writes at different levels of Choyma Adinim, Dinim Deraisa, Dinim Derabanan, Dinim Divrei Kabbalah, halfway in between the Rabbanan and Deraisa. Then he says the Dinim Torah Shabbal Peh and Torah Shabbat. The Dinim of Torah Shabbal Peh are slightly more kal than Torah Shabbat, and he shoots off a whole bunch of Marmakaimus. So that's apparently how the Rambam understood. That's how the Kes Mishnah says the Rambam got it from this Gemara. Rambam doesn't say you royally that Kiddushai Kesef is only Torah Shabbal Peh. He writes it as if he's quoting a Gemara. So this apparently is the Gemara. Tenach the Kodesh Bekaspa, Kodesh Bebia, Ma'ika Lemeimar. Why is Kodesh Bekaspa understandable? It's not because Hefker doesn't Hefker. How can they be Mafker the moment he was Mekadosh the girl 50 years ago? How can it be Mafker now, ex post facto? So the Rambam understood it. No, Tenach the Kodesh Bekaspa, Kiddushai Kesef is only Torah Shabbal Peh. So that's Yesh Koach Lakar, Afilu B'Kum Yaseh. Kodesh Bebia, Ma'ika Mem, Kodesh Bebia is Torah Shabbat. So Ein Koach Lakar B'Kum Yaseh. That was the Gemara's kasha. So what did the Gemara answer? Afal Pichein, Afke'inhu Rabanan Kedusha Minei. So how does the taka work? How does it work by Kodesh Bebia? We understand it by Kesef, but what's by Kodesh Bebia? So Rashi and Taisa understand from the Gemara. Gemara says, Kol HaMekadosh Adaita de Rabanan Mekadesh, Afke'inhu Rabanan Kedusha Minei. So it's as if everybody gets married. So Arei Mekadesh L'Sli, Kedas Moshe V'Yisrael. It means, I want to marry you on the condition that it'll be approved by the rabbis. So if it'll be disapproved, if the Bezin will not approve of it, so it's as if I was Mekadosh Alat Tanai, and the Bezin disapproves, so the Kedushin falls apart. Okay, that's how Rashi and Taisa understand. But it could be that maybe the Pshat and the Gemara is a little different. Called the Mekadosh Adaita de Rabbana Mekadosh. That's an interesting idea. Or to say Kadas Moshe B'Yisrael. So there's a Gemara in the last parak in Ksubis. The Gemara discusses Mishnayos and Shkolim. Every year the Jews gave Machzah Shekel, and they had way more money than they needed. The Bezin has to figure out whether the coming year, the fiscal year in the Beis HaMikdash begins from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, he's supposed to purchase all the new Karbonis Tzibur from the new Machzah Shekel money. So you have to start collecting from Rosh Chodesh Adar. And they give everybody a month to collect. So they had to figure out whether the coming year it's going to be a Shana Moberis or a Shana Pshuta. How many Karbonis are they going to have to bring? So if it's a Shana Moberis, you need another 30 days. Tamash Schachter, Tamash Ben Abayim, and Musafim for Shabbos. Then you have to figure out how many people are going to give on time. Most people are not going to rush to give on time. So in the Beis HaMikdash, there were different pushkas, gigantic pushkas. So the one said, Taklan Charatin, Shkolam Chadashim for this year. The other one said, Taklan Atikin. They say, a guy never gave Machzah Shekel. He's 85 years old. He never gave Machzah Shekel. Every year, Machzah Shekel is a different amount of money. The person has to make an assessment. How much money do they think they're going to need? How many people are going to give the money on time? How many behemoths will they need? Will it be a Shana Mever, Shana Pshuta? And will the price of behemoths go up or go down? Did the price ever go down? They're probably going to go up. They have to calculate all these things. So the Gemara has a whole discussion. The Mishnayos have in Shkolim. Every year there was tons of money left over. So what they do with the leftover money? So the Gemara said, the Mishnayos said, they gave money to the Malamdei Tinoikis in Yerushalayim. That other Malamdim who were teaching the Kohanim how to do Kmitza, how to do the Hakravas HaKarbonos. They gave it to good purposes. So the Gemara says, but the people didn't have that in mind. So the Gemara says, Leiv Bezdin Masna Leiv. Bezdin has in mind that the money that's left over, they're going to use for other purposes. So what do you mean, Leiv Bezdin Masna? But Bezdin didn't give the money. Kolech Avech Yisrael gave the money. So Taisus coins an expression based on this, paraphrasing this Gemara. The Gemara says, Call the Mekadosh Adaita the Rabban. Whoever is Mekadosh a girl, the Mekadosh Adaita the Rabban Kadas Moshe Yisrael. So Taisus writes a Malitza, Kol HaMagdish, Al Das Bezin Hu Magdish. Anyone who's Magdish money from Machzah Shekel has in mind Al Das Bezin. So Bezin isn't happy with it, so they can be Mafkir the Kedusha. So that's interesting. We have that din. You have that din also. The Gemara says, Harbe Krachim Kovsha al Mitzrayim al Kosha al Bavel. There were areas in Eretz Yisrael that had Kedusha B'Shoina. And the days of Yeshua ben Nun, it took 7 years to conquer the land. That's what the Psukim say in Sefer Yeshua, Shevish Kovshu. Then the Gemara said they had a oral historical tradition. Shevish Echilko. It took 7 years to divide the land le-Shvatim, le-Mishpachas, and le-Yichidim. So after 14 years, the land was Niskadish. That was the Gemara of the Kibush. So the Gemara says, during the 7 years of Golus Bava, the Kedusha was lost. Then they had to reinstitute the Kedusha the second time. So the Gemara says, the second time around, they were not Mekadosh the whole land. They had Kedusha Vishana. Harbe Krachim. There are many areas, Kovsha al Mitzrayim. They endowed with Kedusha Vala Kovsha al Bava. Why were they not Mekadosh it? For political consideration. Because Shemitah was always a big problem. Shemitah is a problem today. Shemitah was always a problem. It says in the Psukim, the Jews will be sent into Golus, Shaps Arts, Shaps Asa, Kolimei Hashama, all the years, the 7 years of Golus Bavel. Gemara Nercha makes a whole calculation. How they violated 70 years of Shemitah V'Yovel, they violated, so they had to go into Golus for 70 years, connected the 7 years that they violated. So the Gemara says the Rabanan made a political decision not to be Mekadosh all of Eretz the second time around, because it's Anim should have a parnasa. They'll have a place to work during Shemitah. So the rabbis decided, for political considerations, not to be Mekadosh all of Eretz Yisrael. Whatever the rabbis decide, they're the balabatam on the Kedusha. Then the Gemara says, but you're going to see a Shabbat Bavel, al Tanai Heim Asuyim. Many Rishonim hold al Tanai, even the Binyanim, we're allowed to use it for secular purposes. Why? So the Shulchan Aruch says, Lei Bezin Masna. Bezin had in mind. What if there was no Bezin when they were building the shul? You still say Lei Bezin Masna Leim. What kind of a din is that? And then you have in the Mishnayos in Yodayim, the Tanoim were the ones who decided what should belong on the Kisvei HaKodesh. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, dictated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, word for word, letter for letter. They sometimes darshan how come a word is spelled mole, chaser. We have na'ara, sometimes spelled with a, without a hey. The Gemara Ksubis explains why. It makes a difference with a, without a hey. Tahor is sometimes spelled without, or normally spelled with a vav, sometimes without a vav, so it means kor koldu, incomplete Torah, even if it's a tvul yom. He's a Torah alatami, even a tvul yom is good. The Chachamim darshan mole and chaser, we assume our tradition has it, Torah was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu, word for word and letter for letter. So the Tanoim were the ones who decided which Sfarim to incorporate into the Tanakh. There was a dispute on Mishlei, there was a dispute on Koheles, there was a dispute, a question on Shir Hashirim, on Yecheskel. What was the issue? There's only one issue. Every book that was written Baruch HaKodesh doesn't automatically become part. It has to be written Baruch HaKodesh, that's a prerequisite. It has to be Hutz V'chol Adoros, Nebush Hutz V'chol Adoros. But the Chachamim were the ones to decide what belongs in the Kisvei HaKodesh. So it looks, you get the impression that Chachamim, the Bezna Gorel, are the Balabatim to decide on all in Yoni Kedusha, and Kedusha's Beis HaKnesses, and Kedusha's Ha'oretz, and Kedusha's Kisvei HaKodesh. So marriage is also an inyan of Kedusha. There's a very interesting, in the Avnei Nezer has 2 chalokim, and Evan has 2 volumes. So the end of the second volume has Ha'oretz, not daf al daf, Ha'oretz according to the Mesichte in Noshim. He has a few Ha'oretz. He has one very fascinating, very interesting. Avnei Nezer was a Chassidish Rebbe, but he has very strong. So he quotes the Gemara. The Gemara says, Ish v'isha shchina shuei b'neim. The word ish has a yud and the word isha has a hey. It's an agadata and soita. Ish v'isha shchina shuei b'neim. And if there's no shalom bayis, then the shchina disappears and you're left with ish, and it's machlokes in the marriage. So the Gemara has a comment on the pasuk. When a woman becomes a soita, the woman there's a soita bada and a soita sok. Soita bada means we know she's in. Soita sofik, we don't know. Kinei lo ministra, the husband is choshen her, husband warned her, al tistri mishploini, and there was kinui, there was hasra, and the woman violated yichud, we call it stira, so then she becomes hasra al bail unless she drinks the namayim amor. So the pasuk used the lashon v'nitma'ah. What kind of an expression is v'nitma'ah? V'nitma'ah is the way you say the woman was mizana. What kind of an expression is that? So the Avnei Nezer has a pshat on a Gemara. Tumiksiv b'akarais ha-Gemara in Yivom is daf Yud Aleph. So he explains, based on the Kuzari, said, the Kuzari is a historical novel written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was the Talmud of the Rif. In his second career, the Rif lived in Fez in Morocco. That's why it's called Ben Yitzchak al-Fazi. He lived in Fez. Then at the age of 75, they accused him, 75-year-old man, is Murad bin Malchus. Guy sitting and learning, writing the Rif on the Shah, Murad bin Malchus. So he had to run away. We assume he didn't know anything wrong, so he ran away to Spain. He started the second career, and all the famous Talmidim are from the second career. From the first career of Fez, we don't have anything. From the second career, he had all the Megash, and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi and all the others, all from the second career. So in the Kuzari, it's a historical novel. We know for a fact that I think about 10 years ago, they had a big article in the Sunday magazine section of the New York Times about the Kuzarim. Under the communists, they didn't allow the historians to publish what they discovered about the fact that big chunks of Russia used to be under Jewish control years before. Kuzarim were Jewish. They converted. The king converted and had all the people convert. So they were embarrassed about that. So they didn't permit this to be printed. But after communism collapsed in the end of the 1900s, so then they started publishing. So they wrote this whole story about the Kuzarim. We know part of the story. But for years, what happened was that we don't know how much of it is the novel and how much of it is historical. It's a historical novel. that according to the novel, the king had a recurrent dream that someone's telling him, the Rebbeinu is telling him, you have religious inclinations, but you're worshiping the wrong religion. He had the same dream over and over and over again, and so he felt he better look into other religions. So he didn't think the Jewish religion could possibly be the correct religion, because the Jews were downtrodden then. No one respected the Jews. So the only two religions that were respectable were Islam and Christianity. So he invited a representative of those two religions to come speak to him. And he asked, what is your religion based on? So he said, everything is based on the Torah. The Torah is from the Jewish religion. So he figured he's going to ask a rabbi. And he asked the rabbi, and he was very taken by the rabbi. And then he converted, and he got all his cabinet converted, and the whole country converted. And that's the story of the Kuzarim. And the Jews in Cordova, Spain, used to correspond with the Jews in the Kuzari story, wherever in Russia, the Jews who lived over there. And they used to send Rabanan every so often to teach them the dinim of the Torah. So in the conversation that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi imagines between the Melech HaKuzarim and the Chaver, so he asks him, the king asks the rabbi, he calls him the Chaver, so he asks him, you people claim to be Orthodox, you follow everything that it says in the Torah. I don't think that's true. It says in the Torah that you have to go to mikveh when you when you go to a funeral, you become tamei, or you have to go to mikveh when you become a balkari. How come you don't go to mikveh all the time? You should be going to mikveh more often. So the rabbi tells him, a mikveh tumeh is only attached to the sasri with kedusha. If you want to eat truma, you want to eat kachim, you want to eat ma'aser sheni, you want to enter the Beis Hamikdash. Adoni HaMelech, we live so far away from the Beis Hamikdash, we don't have any truma, we don't have any kachim, so that's why we don't go to mikveh. Then he asked him, so why do you insist that the married women have to go to mikveh? So he has a famous line, he said, that has nothing to do with tumah v'tara. That's a big machlekes, whether that's true or not. Taras HaMishpacha has nothing to do with tumah v'tara. So that's a big shaila. Rabbi Soloveitchik always used to say, what do you have to quote from the Kuzari? It's a Tosfos in Bava Kama, famous Tosfos in the first parak in Bava Kama, that the rules and regulation for Sofek Tumah are different by Sofek Tumah, whether the woman is a nida or not. Labaila is one din, and the Tumah V'tara is a different din. So you see the two different din. Anyway, so that's famous from the Kuzari. That's what the Avnei Nezer quotes this from the Kuzari. So he says, Tumah is only poses a problem. Tumah is a tartar sasser with Kedusha. So the Avnei Nezer picks up for that. He says when a couple is married, there's an element of Kedusha that's introduced into their lives that wasn't there before. Ish v'yish shechina shuei b'neihem. And if the woman is v'nitma breaks the marriage. It's mafkia, part of the marriage. Tumah is a tartar sasser with Kedusha. So that's why the Chumash uses that expression, v'nitma. What does that mean? So part of it is the following. We have a din of hol the ishtarya. There's a Mishnah in Yevamis on Daf Samach Aleph. A Kohen Hedyot marries an almana. That's permissible. And then years later the Kohen Gadol dies. And this is a nice fellow. They want to appoint him as a Kohen Gadol, but he's married to an almana. So what do? So the Mishnah says it's not a problem. If he married the woman beheter, he married her when he was a Kohen Hedyot. He's not allowed to marry a grusha. A Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry an almana, but he married a beheter. So hol v'ishtar yishtar. If the woman is materis lebaila, and day number one, she remains materis lebaila. So that's let's say when you do yibum. When you do yibum, the bir rishon is mutter. That's the mitzvah of yivama yavala. How come he's allowed to have bir shniya when he does the first bir? Is already yotze the mitzvah. The answer is hol v'ishtar yishtar. There was heter gomer. The bir rishon was beheter gomer, so he's allowed to have to continue to live with his wife. But what if she was a chavi lavin? Let's say the woman, the almana, is a chavi lavin. So the yavam is allowed to do yibum, the bir rishonah in Torah, but he's not allowed to do bir shniya. Why don't you say hol v'ishtar yishtar? The answer is no. The bir rishonah was muta based on esed dechel asesed. That's the chuya. If it would have been hutra, then you say, so a normal case of Yibum, where there's no Issa Lab or anything, just a Shaila of Eshisach. So that's Hutra. That's Hutra. So since the Bir Rishana was Hutra at the Gomor, they say, Hel V'Ishtar Yishtarya. But if the Yavama happens to be a Chavi Laban, the Bir Rishana is only Muta based on Esa Dechaloi Sesi, that's only Dechuya, then you don't apply Hel V'Ishtar Yishtarya. So, there's all Gemara in Kiddushin. Gemara talks about a Kohen is drafted in the army. The Gemara assumes you draft Kohanim in the army. During the First World War, the British government drafted a lot of Kohanim into the army, and then they said, we're not allowed to go in the army. They were in the First World War. There were going to be dead bodies all over the place. They're not allowed to be in time of Mason. So you can't draft us in the army. So the government sent a Schachter to the chief rabbi Nathan Adler. He's a fine rabbi. And he sent a Schachter to the Bezin in London. Bezin in London was always a respectable Bezin. So they quoted Mordechai and Gittin. Mordechai and Gittin quotes the Gemara in Kiddushin. Gemara says about a Kohen who's in the army, is he mut to be fastoyer or not? The whole discussion in the Gemara. So you do draft Kohanim into the army. There's a Rambam that sounds like you don't draft Shevet Levi. So how do you draft Kohanim? So obviously the Rambam never meant that. He must have meant something else. So the so the Gemara has there one version like this. Bibir Rishayna, everyone agrees that the Kohen is mutter, even though by Kohen there's a double Isser. Any soldier to live with a Yifas Toyar, the conversion is Bal Korcha. She doesn't want to convert. So you have the right to convert a Bal Korcha, which usually is not valid, but here it's mutter. So Bir Rishayna is mutter for the Kohen because the Dibrator Keneged Yetzahara. So the Kohen also has a Yetzahara. The question, Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel, is whether Bir Shniya is also mutter. So what's the Machlokes? So one holds Hor Vishtar Yishtar, the other one holds not. So what are they fighting about? What they say Hor Vishtar Yishtar? So the Rashba there has a pshat, and the Minchas Chinuch picks it up and he explains it by Harchove, but really it's all in the Rashba. The Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel is Bir Rishayna was mutter by the Fastal, the Dibator Kanega Yetzahara, was that Hutra, was that Duchuya. If it's Hutra, then Hor Vishtar Yishtar. If the woman was Muteris Heta Gomer in the beginning of the marriage, then everything is mutter. But it was only mutter because of Duchuya, the Devatal Kaneg Yetzor is Duchuya, so then it wasn't Heta Gomer. It was, Duchuya means because she hitira hatayra, then you're not so held Yishtar. So there's a question that poses itself. When a man gets married to a nice girl, then the girl is Mizana Tachas Baila, so she becomes Asur Baila. But what happened to the din held Yishtar? When he married her, it was Beheta Gomer, and then she became a Saita afterwards. So I should say he's allowed to remain with her. If he'll divorce her and then he wants to remarry her, okay. He say, the Tchilas Ha'isha says B'yisa. But if he didn't divorce her, he's married to her, wants to say, so that's the answer. The Pasuk says, V'nitma'ah, that Tumah is a type that is Sasri with Kedusha. So marriage consists of two parts, Heta L'Baila and Isa Lashuk. So the pasuk of Nitma means Tumah is attacked that is Sasri with Kedusha. Half of the marriage is broken. Half of the issues disappears. The Heta L'Baila disappears. He just left with the other part of the issue that has Isra Akuli Yama. But Heta L'Baila disappears. That's why you don't say Hol V'Ishtarya. So it's possible to say a pshat in the Gemara, Afke'inhu Rabanan Kedushin Minay. The Gemara says, Tenach the Kodesh Bekaspo, Kodesh Bemeikal Meimar. Rashi and Tosis say Hefker Besna Hefker. The Rambam has a different pshat. Probably Rabbi Shal Rashi meant that. So what was the Gemara's final answer? Well, why is it muta? So Rashi and Tosis seem to say that called the Mekadosh Adaita Rabban Mekadosh because it's Avraham Mekadosh Asli, because that's Moshe Yisrael. If the Chacham will approve of them, if they disapprove, it should Michal. But others don't learn like that. So it could be that it's like Taisus paraphrase the Lashon Gemara. Taisus in the last parak in Ksubah says, "Kol ha-magdish al das bezna." When people are magdish the machzah shekel, all in Yoni Kedusha, the Kisvei HaKodesh, and the Kedusha Ha'aretz, and the Kedusha Beis HaKnesses, and the Kedusha of marriage, all the Kedushas are dependent on the approval of the Chachamim. Not only Kol Mekadosh marriage, all in Yoni Kedusha. So maybe that's the basis of Afke'inhu Rabbani Kedusha Minei. They have the right to control all in Yoni Kedusha. Could be. You can say a different shot, but that'll take too long. Okay. It's already too long. Yeshkach for paying attention. Some ideas on the Perek. New shilas are coming up. You people are going to be the Rabbanim in the next generation. You're going to have to pass on these new shilas. I work in the OU for over 30 years in Kashrus. So the first year or two, we used to have meetings every Friday to discuss all of the issues that came up in the course of the week. All the shilas were on chumras on top of chumras. How many chumras are we mechuyev to worry about? Then after a couple of years of chumras, we got some new shilas that were real shilas. Now we get real shilas that were never discussed before. No one ever talks about these shilas. New issues because of new technological advances. You have to know food chemistry. That's ABC, of course. You have to know food chemistry. You have to know more than food chemistry. You have to know a lot. And you people are going to have to work on these shilas. I remember many years ago, the founding Rosh Yeshiva in Shalavim was Rav Meir Schlesinger. He retired already many years ago. He lives in Yerushalayim. So he once told us that the Sukkot after Melchemet Yom Kippurim, he invited all the boys from the Hesder, from the army, those who were in the army during the Melchemet Yom Kippurim, to come to Shalavim on Chalamoid Sukkot the next year, and to write down and to discuss all the shilas that they had. So that shilas, even though the war broke out on Yom Kippur, but there were soldiers, 5 soldiers on one side of the canal, 5 soldiers on the other side of the canal. So the shilah was, can they be mitzaref them to a minyan? Can you mitzaref 5 people in a cave, 5 people out of the cave? Can you blow shofar in the cave, out of the cave, to be moitzah the people? The Gemara talks a little about that, blowing shofar in a cave. That all kinds of shilas. So they wrote it down, all the shilas, then they researched them, they looked them up. He said 85% of the shilas were black on white, covered by the Mishnah Berurah, the Farish. And we don't read every word in the Mishnah Berurah. You read the Mishnah Berurah, it's never going to come up in 100 years. But every 100 years it comes up. So he said most of the answers are Beferish and Mishnah Berurah. The others are not Beferish and Mishnah, but a lot of times it's Beferish and the Gemara. We skim through a Gemara, we don't pay attention. But a lot of times those Gemaras are making assumptions that are very relevant la halacha. There's a Taisus in the beginning of Ksubis, the Taisus has machlokes with Rashi. Avelis Shiva begins after Stimus HaGoylo. What does the word Goylo mean? So Rashi's opinion is the lid of the coffin. So once you put the lid on the coffin, even though you didn't bury the guy yet, the Shiva begins. We don't paskin like that Rashi. A lot of times we paskin like Taisus against Rashi. We don't accept that Rashi. So Taisus learns that the Goylo means the matzeva. The practice in the days of the Gemara was they used to put the matzeva the same day. They buried the person, put the matzeva that day. If they don't, now the meaning is you wait a year later, or you wait a month later, whatever. So it means the Avelis begins when you do the Gemar HaKvura. Whatever you're going to do that day, Gemar HaKvura. So Tosfos says, how can Rashi say that Stimus HaGoylo means the lid on the coffin? There's a discussion in Erevin on Daf Tezvav, if you have a Balchai using a live animal as a Goylo. So if Rashi is right that the Goylo is the lid on the coffin, which lunatic is going to use a live animal to be the lid on the coffin? They're going to bury a live animal alive? That's ridiculous. So it doesn't show that Tosfos is right, that Goylo means a matzeva, and Tosfos says sometimes they didn't have a matzeva prepared, so they bang a peg into the ground, they tie a cow, so tomorrow they'll come and they'll put a matzeva, or not, they'll make a matzeva. Tomorrow they'll come and they'll have a live animal there temporarily. So the Gemara has a discussion whether the live animal can serve, does it have tumas Goylo v'doifek or not. But according to Rashi, how can it be? So then Tosfos says it doesn't really disprove Ratzu Shita, because that's the style of the Talmud to discuss every single case, even if it's not going to happen in 1,000,000 years. So they show, how do you know? Because they quote a Gemara in Bechoros. Gemara in Bechoros has a shaila. There's a cow that's pregnant. It already had velotis before. Now it's pregnant with a new fetus. So they take the fetus out and they put it in the rechem of another cow and never had any velotis before, but she's not the genetic mother. And then the Vlad is born. Does it have a din of Bchor Be'emet Torah? Does it have a Kedushas Bchor? Because they took the fetus from one, they said it's not going to happen in 1,000,000 years. But the Gemara discusses all the abstract case. Now they do it every day. That's how they do it. They do it by human beings also. They take the fetus from one woman, they put it in another woman's rech. Take the fetus from Behemoth. Every Gemara that you skip, because you think it's never going to come up in 1,000,000 years, the 1,000,000th year came already. And all these wild Gemaras are relevant now. And you guys are going to have to, we're the old generation, we're going to disappear. You're going to have to work on all of these shilas. So you have to learn the Gemaras well. Don't say pilpulim. You got to say, pilpulim is a lot of fun. But you got to say, what's halacha l'maisa? Sukkah shmaisa libidilsa. What is the din in the Gemara? And all these cases, because all these wild cases they're coming up every day now. So I give you a bracha. You should be matzliach in learning. You should get good shidduchim. Everything should go well. Baruch nisa b'gashmiz. But you're going to have to pass on all the shilas. So pay good attention to the Gemara.